What if the delay in your life is not punishment? What if God is not ignoring you, but preparing something greater than you can currently understand? Because one of the hardest parts of faith is not suffering, it's waiting. Waiting for the prayer to be answered, waiting for healing, waiting for clarity, waiting for the breakthrough. And sometimes, while we wait, it feels like heaven is silent, but there is a hidden message inside Jesus' first miracle that reveals something astonishing about the delays of God, a message that could completely change the way you see your struggles. Stay with me until the end, because what Jesus did at Cana may explain why some of your deepest prayers have taken so long. The story begins with a problem nobody expected. At a wedding celebration in Cana, the wine suddenly runs out. Now imagine the atmosphere: music, joy, families celebrating, the bride and groom filled with hope for the future. And suddenly, hidden behind the smiles, disaster appears. The wine is gone. And here is the strange part. Most people at the wedding had no idea. The guests didn't know. The groom didn't know. Even the master of the banquet didn't know. But Mary noticed. And this should deeply comfort every believer listening today. Because long before we recognize our crisis, God already sees it. Before your heartbreak, before your loneliness, before the financial collapse, before the anxiety attacks, before the betrayal. He sees the lack before you do. And heaven begins moving before you even realize you need help. Mary approaches Jesus and quietly says, "They have no more wine." No panic, no dramatic speech, just trust. But Jesus responds in a mysterious way. "My hour has not yet come." At first glance, it sounds like a delay, like hesitation, like waiting. And maybe many of us know exactly what that feels like. You pray, but nothing changes. You ask, but heaven feels quiet. You wait, and wonder if God even hears you. But then Mary says something extraordinary to the servants. Do whatever he tells you. Notice this carefully. Mary trusts Jesus before seeing evidence, before the miracle, before the answer, before understanding. And this is where real faith begins. Not after the miracle, before it. Then Jesus gives instructions that seem completely unreasonable. He tells the servants to fill massive stone jars with water. Think about how strange this must have looked. The problem was wine, not water. And yet Jesus asks them to carry heavy jars, one after another, without explaining anything. The servants could have complained. They could have asked questions. They could have refused. But instead, they obeyed. And this reveals a spiritual truth many people struggle to accept. God often asks for obedience during seasons that make no sense. Sometimes he asks us to forgive while still hurting, to trust while confused, to keep praying while nothing changes, to remain faithful while feeling forgotten. And during those moments, it can feel exhausting, like carrying water with no visible result. But the servants at Cana teach us something powerful. The miracle began long before the transformation became visible. And maybe that is happening in your life right now. Maybe heaven is working underneath the surface in ways you cannot yet see. Maybe God is preparing something while you think nothing is happening. Because suddenly, at the perfect moment, the water becomes wine. Not average wine, not barely acceptable wine, the best wine. And this is the part that should shake us deeply. The best wine came later, after the waiting, after the lack, after the confusion, after the obedience. And maybe that is exactly how God works in our lives. We often think our best days are behind us. We panic when something ends. We fear when doors close. We lose hope when life becomes difficult. But what if the running out was necessary? What if the old wine had to disappear so heaven could reveal something greater? Because spiritually speaking, many people are terrified of emptiness. We fear losing control. We fear weakness. We fear uncertainty. But throughout Scripture, God repeatedly works through empty places. Empty nets before miraculous catches. Empty tombs before resurrection. Empty hands before blessing. And empty jars before new wine. Could it be that your emptiness is not evidence that God abandoned you, but evidence that He is preparing room for something new? There is another hidden detail in this story that most people overlook. The people who truly understood the miracle were not the important guests, not the wealthy, not the famous. The servants knew. Why? Because they stayed close enough to the process to witness what God was doing. And perhaps that explains why some people recognize God's activity more clearly than others. Because intimacy with God changes perspective. The closer you walk with Him, the more you begin noticing His fingerprints everywhere. In delays, in closed doors, in unexpected timing, even in suffering. And yes, this is difficult, because human beings hate waiting. We want immediate answers, immediate healing, immediate success, immediate peace. But God often moves slower than our emotions, not because He is cruel, but because He sees what we cannot. A child may cry when a parent says, "Not yet," but the parent sees dangers the child does not understand. And many times, years later, we finally realize God was protecting me. Some relationships ended because heaven saw what we could not. Some delays saved us from disasters we never knew existed. Some disappointments redirected us toward our true purpose. At the moment, it felt painful, but later, it became mercy. And maybe someone listening right now desperately needs to hear this. Just because God is silent does not mean God is absent. Jesus was physically present at the wedding before the miracle happened. The silence did not mean abandonment. And perhaps heaven is far closer to your situation than you realize. Perhaps God is already working on prayers you think He ignored. Perhaps angels are moving in ways invisible to human eyes. Perhaps your story is still unfolding. Because one of the greatest lies fear tells us is this: it's over. But Cana tells a different story. The wine ran out, and heaven still intervened. The joy disappeared, and Jesus still restored it. The situation looked embarrassing, and God still transformed it beautifully. So if you are waiting today, if you are tired, if you feel forgotten, remember Cana. Remember the servants carrying water without understanding. Remember Mary trusting before the answer appeared. And remember this powerful truth: God's delays are not God's denials. Sometimes the best wine comes later. Sometimes heaven saves the greatest miracles for the moments when human hope is almost gone. And maybe, right now, you are much closer to your miracle than you think.